Okay. Hello everyone. We're just waiting a little moment. We've got a few people that are joining us. A few of our schemes, the resident schemes, are coming through. So I'll just wait just another 30 seconds or so, and then we'll make a start. But thank you for everyone that's joined already. Hopefully you can hear me okay, and the technology is working okay too. Okay, I'm gonna make a start. We've hung on a couple of minutes, so we'll make a start. So again, thank you for joining me. This is the first time we're trying to do this, which is just kind of connecting with different residents in a different way of doing things. But to help me and make sure I was a little bit more structured in what I was going to talk about, I've got a few slides to go through, and we'll cover the following areas. Second. Okay, so I'm going to go through the resident survey, just a bit of feedback in terms of what it was telling us. I'll talk a little bit about the service charge consultations that are probably underway, if not they're about to start in your schemes. I'll also refer to the Extra Care Resident Forum and the work we're doing there, communication moving forward, and also if you give us a Q&A or just let us know any questions, if you pop them in the Q&A box as well, that'd be really helpful as we go through, and we'll get to them at the end. Okay, we'll make a start. So our resident survey, we undertook this in June to September. Hopefully you took part in that. This year it included something called the tenant satisfaction measures, or TSMs as we refer to it. But what that means is the social regulator of housing made that mandatory for all housing associations to cover those TSMs. So the questions might have been a little bit different this time. We had a response rate of over 57%, which is okay. I'd really like us to get much higher than that. So we're going to do some work on how we can increase that going forward. We had over 3,500 responses from people in rented properties, which is great, in Extra Care, and over 750 for shared owners. So we've got loads of good feedback from residents in terms of what they were telling us. What did that look like? So Extra Care came out at 87% satisfied. That's suggesting that 87% of people were happy with their services. That's actually a 1% increase on last year, but I will say our target is to get to 95%. So I was some way off that. So all the work that we're going to do across the next year will be focused on us trying to achieve 95% satisfaction. Just breaking down into your regions, you can see a few things there. If you live in Guernsey, you're very happy, which is great. We've got a scheme in Guernsey. There must be something in the water. And also Walsall PPP, they had 95% satisfaction, which is really high. Clarion that's on the screen, we acquired some old Clarion schemes earlier in the year. So we've got them in at this time, even though they're referring back to last year. But actually, you'll see the satisfaction is quite low there, and it gives us some work to do, which we kind of knew as well. In terms of shared owners, that was 79%. That's dropped a little bit. And you can see again just a breakdown of what our people living in our shared ownership properties were telling us, which is a bit of a mixture in terms of percentages. Just moving on. So these are the tenant satisfaction measures, the questions that we spoke about. You'll notice I've highlighted a couple there. There was some okay scoring, but there's some things that drew out particularly for me, which was complaints in particular. 50% of residents saying they were happy with complaints isn't good enough from my perspective. And then we've also got the contribution to neighbourhood, antisocial behaviour, and listens and acts were a couple of areas that I drew out where I think we were lower than where we should have been. These are some of the comments that residents said, just pulling a couple out. I won't go through them all, but residents suggested that in rented properties said they felt safe and secure, which is great. And some really positive comments about the manager we drew out as well. So there were a couple of things there in terms of positive comments. When thinking about what residents told us we need to improve, if 21% have said it was still very positive, which is great. But there was also comments about the scheme and the estate itself, which we just need to understand a little bit more, and tenant services and management as well, and communication, which was a common theme, which I'll come back to. In terms of those living in shared ownership properties, again, really positive comments about the attitude of the staff, the employees in the scheme, which is great, and safe and secure came out quite high as well. Just thinking about what some of our shared owners said and where we needed to improve, Again, the scheme in the estate was quite a high percentage of negative comments or an area for dissatisfaction, and a few around the manager as well, and the local services. So it's really important we help unpick some of that. Notwithstanding, there was a huge amount of positive comments in that space as well. So what does that mean? There's the common themes that I drew out, as I mentioned, how complaints are dealt with, not very good, and that's what the residents are telling us. So we need to do something about that. When they talked about the scheme services, the facilities was one area in particular that residents felt that we needed to be a little bit stronger at. And I think in extra care, something like catering, which is a big driver for satisfaction, was something we need to look a bit more closer at. Value for money was another area. Of course, we know there's been some really high increases in everything over the past year, and that is definitely something that came out as a driver for for our residents in terms of satisfaction. And finally, just the communication and listening to views. Listening and act upon kind of views from residents was a lower percentage for us, and that's something I think we should be much stronger at, because we've got a great on-site presence and something we're going to be working on. So they were the common themes from the survey. Just in terms of next steps, each scheme will have its own set of results where there's been 10 or more responses, so you should be seeing that delivered very soon to your scheme. And when we're doing a bit of a you said, we did, so whatever you said in those local scheme surveys, we'll respond to and tell you what we're doing about it. With any scheme that had less than 10 kind of responses for the survey, we'll develop some actions to help improve engagement. As I always think, if you've got only a small amount of people responding, it means that could be a driver for dissatisfaction. So we're going to do lots of work to help improve engagement. And then finally, we'll be updating on the national and regional plans through the court newsletter. So please keep your eye out for the court newsletters, as we'll update you on a little bit of that as well. Okay, so that's the resident survey. I'm going to move on to utilities. As I said, if you've got any questions, just drop them in the Q&A box. So service charge consultations, they should be happening in but they definitely happen in November and December. So you should be invited to a meeting where either the regional manager or the housing and care manager will be holding a consultation or discussion around the service charges. Please get involved. They are such an important meeting because you help set the budgets for the year in terms of what they look like. And this year we'll also be talking about some techniques to help reduce costs, in particular about how we can save on energy and different things. And we've got something called operational light bulb, which you might hear us talk about, which is a way of talking locally about how turning things off and just reducing energy costs can actually have quite a big impact on an overall scheme in terms of the charges. So please get involved in those service charge consultations. I wrote to all residents a few weeks ago talking about the utility charges and a story of deficits and surpluses, as we referred to as. You'll have heard me refer to it if you read the letter, which was a £12 million utility deficit from last year. What that meant is 2 years ago, when we set the budgets for the 2022-23 year, we obviously had no idea what was going to happen in Ukraine. So the budgets for that year and the charges that residents were paying on utilities were far lower than what was actually happening in terms of utility charges, particularly on communal areas. So that meant there was a deficit being created, and that's what we refer to as that £12 million deficit for the year. You should hopefully have received your statements for that year very recently, which will show you if your scheme does have a deficit, which the majority will do. However, this year, as we set the budgets for next year, which we're doing in the service charge consultations, this year already we're building up what's called a surplus. And the reason for that is when we set the charges this time last year for the year 2023-24, which we're currently in, we set the budgets much higher than what we're actually seeing in utility costs, because as you'll know in the news, they've come down now. And rather than wait till the year after when you would see some of that surplus, in those service charge conversations, our regional manager will talk to you about the option of taking a proportion of that surplus now to help reduce costs next year, so they don't spike too much, considering that £12 million deficit, as I've talked about from last year. So I know that's confusing, and we've got some service charge documentation to help understand that, but please attend the service charge consultations. And I know your regional managers will really explain that really clearly in talking about the options for taking some of the surplus so we can help keep service charges down next year. Rent increases, the board are discussing the rent increases in the next couple of weeks at the board meeting. The normal approach to rent increases is what they call the Consumer Price Index, CPI, in September. And that's plus 1%. So that would normally be around 7.7%. But the board are discussing rent increases because we know that's something to discuss in the next couple of weeks. So I will update you on the rent increases and what that looks like as soon as we've got and had the opportunity to discuss it with the board. And finally, just on this side, I would refer to the Helping Hands Fund. The Helping Hands approach, we've helped so many residents access lots of benefits and support they may not have been aware of. And also where residents have fallen into real financial hardship, we have been able to support them a little bit as well. Please do talk to your managers on the schemes about Helping Hands and talk to us if you are finding you are in challenging with finances in particular, because we do absolutely want to help all residents where we can. So please get involved, or speak with your manager if you are finding yourself in financial hardship, and we'll be there to help as much as we possibly can. Okay. In terms of the Extra Care Resident Forum, the lovely picture you have on the right is Ian Devereux, who's one of our residents that lives in Kent. He won't thank me for showing his photo, but I thought it was important. And Ian is on our Extra Care Committee, which is a board committee. So he sits on that, and he keeps he has a resident voice in terms of letting us know what we're doing right and what we're doing wrong. And Ian's a really valuable member of the Extra Care Committee, but also Ian has set up a resident forum, which is from ambassadors from a number of schemes, resident ambassadors from a number of schemes across the country. And I've put on there a few of the things that Ian and the residents have been talking about, in particular, myths around GDPR, data protection, and what you can and can't say locally. I know that's something that residents feel really strongly about, in terms of they want to know what's happening if they're not seeing their neighbour for a while and what we can and can't say. So I know Ian and the Resident Ambassador Forum are working with us on what getting more clearer messages out, so we don't get confused with data protection or what we can and can't say, and just be really clear and kind of working through some of those myths perhaps. Absolutely, Ian and the team and the residents are thinking about how we can improve communication. I've talked about clarity on service charges. I know the resident forum met a few weeks ago, and that was an area that they felt we needed to be better at in terms of explaining service charges more clearly. So Ian and the residents are helping us do that. They're also working on the website development. Please get on to Housing 21 website if you've not done that yet. And let us know what you think about it, because there's an improvement project for our website underway. And finally, just two more things that they've been talking about was the welcome packs for new residents coming in, and how we can help new residents better navigate their way through Housing 21. And finally, they also had an update on the new housing and care systems that we're going to be implementing. And I know they had lots to talk about and lots to say on that in terms of how it can improve the service for residents, which ultimately that's what they're there to do. Ian asked me and the residents asked me just to kind of, they'd love to hear from the resident associations that you've got online or in and around services. So please do get in touch with us. I'll put my email at the end of the presentation. But do let us know if you've got any resident associations, because Ian and the resident forum would love to hear from you in terms of some of the things and challenges that you're seeing, so they can make sure that's represented back to Housing 21 and hold us to account for making some of those improvements, which the newly formed resident forum is doing. So that's Ian and the resident forum. So please do get in touch with them. And finally, just in some other news, I thought I'd talk to you a little bit about what was happening across Extra Care. So I mentioned we're implementing a new housing and care management system, and that's underway. So that'll be digitalising care for people that are in receipt of care, and the new housing management system will help us be able to access information quicker and better and smarter, so we can answer queries much quicker in terms of what residents are looking for. I mentioned about catering options. I think it's a real big driver in Extra Care for satisfaction, and some of them work brilliantly, and we definitely don't want to look at doing anything with those. But in some areas we actually don't have catering because we've struggled to find a catering provider. And so we're working on a project to think about how we can offer catering in a slightly different way, because we know, as I said, it's such an important part of Extra Care. So we absolutely want to make sure people can get involved with it. We're looking at a project for repairs costs and offering improved value for money, which I know many residents have talked to me about before. So we're underway with that. The care survey is about to come out. So for those people in receipt of care, please do let us know what you think about the care service. It helps us improve, which is important. Resident stories is something that we really value. We've got some fabulous resident stories recently, and there's some case studies that are happening across the country, which you're going to share, because there's brilliant stories of our residents. So please, if you've got any stories that you think are really great and you'd like to tell us about, please drop us an email to the email on the screen, and I'll make sure I follow that up later as well, because we'd love to hear from them. And finally, the picture on the right is myself and Rishi Sunak. Politics aside, not sure what you think of him, but he is the Prime Minister, and he did visit one of our extra care schemes in North Yorkshire a couple of weeks ago, and he went and spent time with residents, which I thought was fabulous. And I know the residents spoke to him a lot about the service of extra care and what it does, and I know he went away from that feeling that he knew the importance of extra care and how it can have such a positive impact. So I thought it was helpful just to share those couple of other updates. So I said that's my email address. Hopefully many of you have it anyway. Please do drop me a line if you want to hear anything more about what we've talked about, and I will, and anything you want to talk about generally anyway, or just it'd be great to hear from you. In terms of next steps, as I said, this will be recorded, so we'll be able to get this digitally out to many residents in terms of getting their feedback. But I'll also follow up in the court newsletter in terms of some of the things we've talked about. So please have a look at that, and the contact details will be on there too. So that's me done. I will stop sharing my screen. I'm not sure if there are any questions. Katie, are there any questions?
None have come in yet.
That's okay. Not to worry. If there are any questions or anything that that people do want to kind of ask me, just as I said, drop me an email, drop me a note. Or let us know what you're thinking. And as I said, we're going to continue to try these and do them more often, and hopefully we'll get many more residents connected and involved, so they can interact with me at any scheme at any point. But also, as I said, you do know that you can contact me at any time as well. So I think
just had a question, sorry.
Okay.
Somebody has just asked if we will be doing more of these.
Yes, we definitely will. So well, this is the first one we've tried, so we'll take stock and see how it's gone, but we'd love to hear from you in terms of what you thought about it as well. But without doubt, we would do them every 3 months. So every quarter of the year, we would do a live session and update residents on what's happening. But as I said, it will always be followed up with something in the court newsletters or regular different ways of communication. But we will absolutely be doing more of them. We'll try and see how they go, but do let us know what you think and if it could work better or how we could do it differently. As I said, it's our first one, and we're very, very keen to see how it goes going forward, but very long way of saying yes, Katie, we will be doing more of them. I don't think there are any more questions. So on that note, I won't keep you any longer. It's lovely to see you, although I can't see you. It's lovely to, I'm sure some of you are there. And I will look forward to speaking to you all again soon. Okay, cheerio.